Okay, so let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Monday, February 23, 2026. And I have to say right up front, usually when we sit down to record this, we have a very specific vibe.
A very predictable vibe.
Right, predictable. We usually have, a stack of academic papers or maybe a dense economic forecast for the next quarter, or a really heavy investigative report on supply chains or climate infrastructure. We like data.
We do like data. We like footnotes. We like things to be serious. We are usually the people at the party standing in the corner talking about interest rates.
Exactly. We are those people. But today we are looking at something, well, I think it's fair to say we're looking at something completely different. We are unpacking a blog post.
But not just any blog post. I mean, this isn't a recipe for sourdough bread, and it's not a travel diary from someone's gap year.
No, definitely not. We are looking at a piece of writing that is just unique. It comes from a source known online as Barakface.
Barakfit, right?
Yeah, and just for a little context, because you definitely need context for this before we dive in, the author claims to be Barack Obama's first full-time volunteer in New York City. That's the backstory. That's the lore of this blog.
Which is already a very specific lens to view the world through.
Very specific.
Yeah.
But the content we are looking at today from this source, it is this wild, satirical, almost hallucinogenic mix of geopolitical analysis, historical deep diving, and what I can only really describe as cosmic comedy.
Cosmic comedy is a good way to put it. It is certainly a unique voice. I've seen political satire and I've seen astronomy blogs, but I really don't think I've ever seen them mashed together with this much intensity.
It's a genre all of its own. Let's call it astrophysical political satire. So the post we are analyzing is titled The Brittleness of Tyranny, a Cosmic Satire. Or more specifically, the headline reads, From Shattered Dreams to Galactic Farts, Iran's Glass Giant versus Jupiter's Gas Giant Showdown.
That title alone, I mean, it really sets the stage, doesn't it? You know, you aren't getting a dry policy brief when the title literally references galactic farts.
Right, you know exactly what you are in for. And I want to set the scene for everyone listening. It's February 2026. The world is in a very specific place politically right now, which we will get into. But this blog post captures a mood.
A very chaotic move.
Frantic, even. It's frantic, it's hilarious, but underneath the jokes, it is making a really profound point about how regimes survive, or frankly, how they don't survive.
That's the key, isn't it? We are going to have a lot of fun with the puns today, and there are a lot of fun.
So many, Pike.
So many. But our goal here is to look past the humor to the core premise. The author is using this absurdity to explore a very real concept, the difference between a regime that is brittle and one that is resilient.
Exactly. So here's the mission for this deep dive. We are going to strip back the layers of jokes that we are definitely going to enjoy them along the way, and we are going to get to the core argument.
Which is this central metaphor. Comparing the regime in Iran, which the author calls a glass giant, to the planet Jupiter, the gas giant.
It sounds totally absurd on the surface. Like, why compare a theocratic government to a planet made of gas?
According to our source, it is because one shatters under pressure and the other just passes it.
Passes it, yes.
Okay.
Right. And we should set the tone expectations here for you, the listener. The source material is heavy on wordplay. We were talking about phrases like galactic farts and shattered dreams.
But our job is to take that humor seriously. We want to understand what this specific imagery tells us about the collapse of regimes in the year 2026. Because there is real political theory buried in here.
So let's unpack this. We start with Section 1, the glass giant theory. This is the deconstruction of brittleness.
Yeah.
The blog paints this visual of a towering, intimidating figure. I want you to just picture it.
Right, it looks strong. It looks unyielding.
It casts a huge shadow over everything.
It is the iron fist archetype. That's what we usually call it in political science. You know, the strong man, the unbending state. But the argument here is that we are misidentifying the material completely.
The source argues that this rigidity is actually a fatal flaw. It describes the regime not as iron, but as a giant made of recycled beer bottles or sugar glass.
Which is such a specific and degrading image. Recycled beer bottles. It implies it's cheap, it's dirty, and it's sharp. It's not this refined, majestic structure.
And sugar glass implies it's fake.
Yeah.
Like a prop in a movie. It looks incredibly dangerous, but if you just poke it, it snaps. It is transparent in its fragility.
This leads to what the author calls the paradox of strength. The regime looks unyielding, but because it cannot bend, it is actually fundamentally weak. In engineering and in politics, flexibility is strength. If you are rigid, you are brittle.
I love the analogy the author uses for the leadership to explain this mindset. He compares Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei to that one uncle at a family gathering. You know the one.
Oh, everyone knows the one. The one who appoints himself the guardian of the house rules.
Exactly. No dancing, no mixed genders, turn the music down. But the source makes a very specific joke here that I think is brilliant. It says he protects the Wi-Fi password with his life, and the password is probably Deaf to America 123.
It's a very funny image, but let's look at what that joke is actually doing mechanically. It reduces the supreme leader from this terrifying, untouchable theological figure to a petty, annoying relative.
A guy hoarding the router.
Exactly. It speaks to a zero flexibility mindset. He controls the information, the Wi-Fi, and he enforces these rigid, outdated rules on everyone else in the house.
And the physics of tyranny, as described here, is that being a pain in the neck, spelled P-A-N-E, leads to a Saturday night fever.
There it is, the first of many puns. But it makes perfect sense, right? If you are rigid, if you are a pane of glass, you can't bend. You can't absorb a blow from the outside. You just break.
And the concept that a transparent tyranny is prone to painful breaks is really the thesis statement of the first half of this deep dive.
Precisely. A transparent tyranny means everyone can see through it. We all know it's hollow. We know it's fragile. And the source doesn't just leave this as an abstract theory. It provides a glass giant hall of shame.
Yes. This is where the historical analysis really kicks in, and it's fascinating.
It functions as a list of evidence. The author is saying, look, I'm not just making this up. History is literally littered with glass giants.
Let's walk through these because the descriptions are pure gold. The first one cited is Nicolae Ceausescu of Romania going back to 1989.
The classic example of sudden regime collapse. The source points to that one specific moment, the heckled speech.
The booed balcony speech.
It's a historical turning point. One minute, he is the absolute unquestioned authority. He's standing on that balcony in Bucharest. He thinks the crowd is there to cheer him like they always do.
Because they have to.
Right, because it's mandated. And then someone starts booing. Just one ripple in the crowd.
And you can see it on his face in the actual footage. The shock, the confusion.
The illusion breaks. The glass shatters right there on live television. The moment the people realized he was confused, his power evaporated instantly.
The source says the empire went from iron curtain to shattered certain. And then drops the pun, it was a glasnostrophe.
Glasnostrophe. That is very clever. It combines glasnost, the openness policy that contributed to the fall of the Soviet bloc, with catastrophe. It perfectly encapsulates that exact moment of brittle failure.
Then we move to a much more recent example, at least according to the timeline of this blog post. We're looking at Bashar al-Assad of Syria. Now remember, the date of this source is February 2026. The text places Assad's downfall in 2024.
This provides us with really important context for the world this author is inhabiting. In this 2026 reality, Assad is already gone, 2 years gone.
And the source describes his fall as being like a Jenga tower built by a toddler on Red Bull.
That is such a vivid, chaotic image. Jenga is already unstable by design. You pull one block, it wobbles.
Right.
But add a toddler and add caffeine. It implies the regime was haphazard, it was erratic, and structurally doomed to fail from the start.
And it calls his regime a brittle bash that couldn't withstand the wind tunnel of history. Again, reinforcing this idea that rigidity cannot survive high-pressure environments over time.
It's the wind tunnel test. If you aren't aerodynamic, if you aren't flexible, the wind just tears you apart. You can't fight the wind by being stiff.
Moving on to the Philippines and Ferdinand Marcos. The mechanism of failure here wasn't necessarily a civil war, but defections from within.
Right. The source compares it to a faulty window in a hurricane.
Which is a terrifying thing to be near, frankly.
Exactly. The pressure builds outside the window. That's the people power revolution building in the streets. And the seal of the window just gives way.
It doesn't slowly open.
No, it bursts. And suddenly you have what the author calls a Marcos mess of shards.
I'm definitely starting to sense a theme with this shards imagery here.
It is the central motif for sure. If you are glass, you leave shards. Look at Saddam Hussein in Iraq in 2006. The imagery there is a chandelier in a sandstorm.
Which is actually quite poetic in a very destructive way.
Think about it. A chandelier is ornate, it's heavy, it's expensive, and it is completely unsuited for a sandstorm. It just swings and smashes against itself.
It fits the glass giant theory perfectly. It looks incredibly impressive hanging there in the palace, but the moment the environment changes, the Saddam shatter happens under coalition pressure and it destroys itself.
Then we have Muammar Gaddafi in Libya 2011. The source calls it tentpole tyranny.
Which fractures like fine china in a foxhole.
Again, the mismatch between the delicacy of the material, the fine china, and the absolute brutality of the environment, a foxhole.
And the characterization here, Gaddafi the Daffy.
Reducing a terrifying absolute dictator to a cartoon character, that is a huge part of the satire's power. It strips away the fear entirely. You can't be terrified of someone you call Daffy.
We can't forget Benito Mussolini, the fascist facade.
Which splintered like stained glass in a blitz.
Stained glass is beautiful to look at. It tells a grand story, but it has absolutely no structural integrity. It can't hold up a building.
And the pun for this one, il duce, reduced to il debris.
Il debris. I think that might be one of my favorites, honestly. It just reduces the grand title, the leader, to literal garbage, to rubble in the street.
And finally, rounding out the Hall of Shame, Pol Pot in Cambodia and Idi Amin in Uganda.
Pol Pot was pot-shotted to pieces, leaving pot shards.
And Idi Amin.
A brittle biscuit that crumbled. He was eliminated.
Like eliminated, but, well, you get it.
We get it. It's a groaner for sure.
But looking at this whole list, Romania, Syria, Philippines, Iraq, Libya, Italy, Cambodia, Uganda, the sheer volume of these historical examples really strengthens the author's premise.
It builds a very solid case.
All of these regimes projected immense strength. All of them were giants in their time, and all of them broke because they simply couldn't bend when history demanded it.
Which brings us right to the present day of the source material. Iran in 2026. The author argues that Iran is showing all the cracks in the glass right now. It's not totally shattered yet, but the spiderwebs are everywhere.
And the cracks described are severe. The source provides a snapshot of current events in this 2026 timeline. First and foremost, there is a figure cited. 30,000 protesters killed in January 2026.
That is a staggering number, and it sets a very dark, serious tone right underneath all the comedy. We need to acknowledge that this isn't just theoretical for the author. It's a massacre.
It is the massacre that serves as the primary impact point on the glass. That kind of violence creates stress fractures that cannot be repaired. But the cracks are spreading everywhere else too. Look at the economy. Inflation is cited at 60%.
The metaphor used there is that the economy is inflating like a balloon animal at a bad party, or alternatively deflating like a popped balloon.
It suggests an economy that is entirely distorted. It's artificial and it's on the verge of bursting. A balloon animal is a novelty. It's not a real economic structure. Then you have the infrastructure. Tehran is facing massive power outages.
The author calls it a romantic candlelit dinner, minus the romance, of course, or a glow-stick rave gone wrong.
It paints a very bleak picture of a modern capital city that is fundamentally failing to provide basic services to its citizens. It's dark, literally and metaphorically. When the lights go out, the legitimacy of the state flickers too.
People notice when the lights don't turn on. And healthcare is taking a massive hit too. The source mentions that 80% of pharmacies are bankrupt.
That is a critical failure of the state apparatus. If people cannot get basic medicine, insulin, heart medication, antibiotics, the social contract is completely broken. The state is no longer keeping you alive.
The author calls this a shatter pill aimed at the health system. It's a pill that doesn't cure you, it just breaks things further.
There is also the geopolitical angle to all this. The source describes Iran as suffering from strategic vertigo.
That's a really interesting concept. Vertigo. Vertigo comes from spinning or losing your balance right. The regime is dizzy from spinning in circles of defiance.
And they are dizzy because they're entirely alone now. The text explicitly mentions the loss of key regional allies. We talked about Assad falling in 2024. Hezbollah is also mentioned as being gone in this timeline.
So Iran is like a spinning top that has lost its momentum.
It's wobbling. It's isolated on the world stage. The glass giant is standing alone in the wind tunnel, and the cracks are just getting wider and wider.
So that is the diagnosis. The patient is brittle. The prognosis is a catastrophic shattering. But the author doesn't just leave us with the problem. He offers a pivot, a complete paradigm shift for survival.
Enter the gas giant.
Why Jupiter, though? Why make that specific astronomical leap?
It's the transition from glass to gas. It's a fundamental material change. Jupiter is 90% hydrogen and helium. It's not a solid object. It's a massive ball of fluid dynamics.
Bringing us to the whoopee cushion theory.
Yes, the whoopee cushion theory. The source calls Jupiter the solar system's biggest whoopee cushion. It's floating, it's billowy, and most importantly for regime survival, it is entirely impact absorbent.
This is the key difference, right? Resilience strategies. How do you handle a meteor hitting you?
If you are a glass giant like Iran, you try to stop the meteor with force. You use bullets and blackouts, you try to be hard and impenetrable, but if the meteor is big enough or fast enough, you shatter.
But Jupiter
Just slurps it up. The source says it absorbs meteors like a cosmic sponge or a gaseous gut punch. It doesn't fight the impact at all, it just incorporates it into its mass.
It literally says, "Come at me, bro."
Come at me, bro, yes. It's an attitude of invincibility through extreme flexibility.
Yeah.
You can't break something that doesn't have a solid surface to break against.
And then there is the whole issue of managing internal dissent. In Iran, dissent is violently crushed. We saw that with the 30,000 figure, but on Jupiter.
On Jupiter, you have the Great Red Spot. The author uses this planetary feature as a direct metaphor for a political storm or a revolution. That storm has been raging on Jupiter for centuries.
It's bigger than the entire Earth.
It is massive. And Jupiter's approach isn't to try and suppress it or calm it down. Jupiter's approach is let it spin. Make it a tourist attraction. Come see the eternal hurricane. No repression needed.
The core lesson being, don't suppress just vortex.
It is a really fascinating take on political tolerance and regime longevity. If you allow the storm to exist within the system itself doesn't break. The storm just becomes part of the everyday landscape.
It suggests that true stability comes from managing chaos, not trying to eliminate it completely.
The source also does this great comparison of planetary stats versus regime stats. Let's look at the moons versus goons comparison.
This is a direct hit at the enforcement apparatus of the state. Iran relies on the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, to maintain order. These are the goons required to keep the glass from breaking every single way.
They are very expensive, they are highly violent, and they are necessary because the system has absolutely no natural attraction to its people.
And Jupiter.
Jupiter has 95 moons, and they all orbit loyally without any coercion whatsoever. No enforcers are needed. Gravity just does the work naturally.
It's the ultimate contrast of a natural, undisputed authority versus a forced, brittle authority.
Then there is enrichment, a very touchy and significant subject for Iran, obviously.
Uranium enrichment. It's heavily sanctioned, it's wildly expensive, and it's highly controversial. It literally brings the entire world's pressure down on them.
Versus Jupiter's core, metallic hydrogen enrichment.
Which sounds way cooler, honestly.
It sounds like science fiction, but it's real. And the source points out it's been doing this for billions of years with no UN sanctions. It's a completely self-sustaining power source deep within, no weapons inspectors needed, just natural high-pressure physics keeping the whole thing going.
And finally, in the stats, break down the spin rate.
Jupiter has a 10-hour day. It spins incredibly fast on its axis. The source calls it a workaholic planet.
And those famous stripes on the planet we all recognize.
Stress lines. The source humorously interprets them as stress lines from managing all those 95 moons without a single coup d'etat. It implies that being a gas giant is hard work. It's dynamic, it's fast-moving, but ultimately it's sustainable.
Now here is where the blog post gets really interesting, or maybe just really weird, depending on how you look at it. The source imagines a totally fictional scenario. It is 2026. Interplanetary zoom is apparently a thing.
Yes, technology has advanced in this satire.
And Supreme Leader Khamenei decides he needs to FaceTime Jupiter for some advice on regime survival.
This interplanetary Zoom call is just a masterclass in political satire. It creates a direct dialogue between the struggling earthbound dictator and the thriving celestial planet.
Let's deconstruct this dialogue a bit because it's rich. Khamenei starts the call with a plea. He is clearly desperate. He says, "Almighty gas giant," or "Gassy Goliath, teach me to endure."
He sees the cracks in his own glass. He knows the end is coming soon, and he wants the secret to Jupiter's longevity.
And Jupiter's response. The source describes the tone of the planet's voice as booming, windy, and belching solar flares.
Jupiter is loud and completely unapologetic. Jupiter is the ultimate Chad in this scenario. And the critique is very sharp. Jupiter tells him outright, "Lose the glass act, buddy. You're rigid as a frozen pane."
And then Jupiter flexes on him. "I'm flexible as a whoopee cushion at a state dinner."
Which is a ridiculous image, a whoopee cushion at a formal state dinner. But again, it reinforces the central point. Jupiter mocks Iran's precarious situation. He compares the crushing international sanctions to his own nature. I'm expansive, not expensive like your sanctions.
That's a really key economic distinction hidden in a joke. Jupiter naturally grows and expands. Iran shrinks under the heavy financial cost of its own rigid policies.
And he mocks the concept of nuclear family values. Jupiter says, I've been enriching my core for eons. Talk about nuclear family values without the fallout.
It highlights the stark difference between a system that generates its own immense power internally and one that relies on dangerous sanction technology that causes literal and political fallout everywhere it goes.
So Jupiter has given his advice. The advice is simply be more like gas. And the blog post actually proposes some concrete policy changes based on this. They call them fertocratic solutions.
These are absurd. Just totally absurd. But let's look at them as legitimate pieces of satire. What is the author really saying here?
First up is a total rebranding of the state, changing the name to the Fartocratic Republic of Iran.
Or the inflatable Islamic Republic.
The proposed new slogan, all bluster, no breaks.
Think about that slogan for a second. All bluster. It implies a regime that talks a very big game. Lots of fiery rhetoric, lots of noise on the international stage, but no breaks.
Meaning it never shatters. It just keeps inflating the balloon bigger and bigger with hot air. It's honestly the ultimate populist survival strategy. When in trouble, just keep inflating the rhetoric.
Then there is the economic pivot proposed. Since the economy is inflating wildly anyway, why not lean into it completely? Export flatulence to power the world.
The marketing slogans they suggest are Persian Gulf gas, now with extra tyranny, or bluster without the bust. It's a very pointed commentary on Iran's actual real-world status as an energy superpower with vast natural gas reserves.
But they are twisting that reality to fit the hot air metaphor of the regime's constant aggressive rhetoric.
Exactly. And then we move to social policy. This one is dark, but admittedly very funny in a bleak way. The question is, how do you handle public mourning ceremonies? Because in Iran, historically, funerals very often turn into massive anti-regime protests.
We saw that clearly with Mahsa Amini a few years ago, and presumably with the 30,000 dead in this 2026 timeline.
Right. The typical glass giant response is brute force. Crack down on the funeral, ban the gathering entirely, beat the mourners in the street, which of course just creates more stress fractures in the glass.
So what is Jupiter's suggestion for handling this? Turn the funerals into Aurora Borealis raves.
The motto is grieve, then groove, no crackdowns, just cosmic breakdowns.
It's the old bread and circuses strategy, but taken to a literal interplanetary level. Distract the populace with a massive sensory spectacle so they don't organize a revolt. If you can successfully turn a somber, angry funeral into a neon rave, you diffuse the political anger completely.
It's deeply cynical, it's dystopian, but effectively, it's exactly what highly resilient regimes try to do. They co-opt the raw public emotion and they turn it into something harmless to the state.
But the author does actually acknowledge a major downside to this gaseous survival strategy.
Global warming.
From excessive regime hot air.
Even a gas giant has environmental consequences. If you pump enough hot air, enough propaganda into the atmosphere just to keep your regime afloat, you might eventually cook the entire planet. It's a very subtle nod to the fact that even quote-unquote resilient tyrannies extract a heavy cost from the world.
I want to take a minute to really appreciate the linguistic gymnastics happening in this source material. We're moving into section 7 now, the linguistic deep dive.
The punishing nature of the source, it really is relentless from start to finish.
It is. So why is the author doing this? Why rely on so many puns when discussing such dark, heavy material? Is it just to be silly?
We touched on this briefly earlier, but it's definitely worth going deeper into the mechanics of it. Puns, in this context, are a weapon. There is a very long, rich history of this in political resistance. When you make a pun about a brutal dictator, you are actively refusing to take them seriously on their own terms.
You are stripping away their power.
You are reducing their terrifying aura. Let's list a few more of the glass puns that stood out in the text. We had Saturday Night Fever earlier.
Pain in the neck, which visually becomes pain in the neck.
Glasnostrophe, which we discussed. And the description of the rigid theocracy is clearer than crystal but cracks under pressure.
Then we have the gas puns. Fertile Republic.
That is a very direct and disrespectful play on titles like Ruhollah or Ayatollah.
Ayatollah gas. Methanize the Middle East.
The expert take here on the linguistic strategy is that when you call a deadly, brutal crackdown a Saturday Night Fever, you are taking ownership of the historical narrative.
You are refusing to be a victim to their seriousness.
You are essentially saying to the regime, you can hurt us physically, but you absolutely cannot stop us from laughing at you. It takes the power back.
It reduces a heavily armed dictatorship to a shattered pane of glass on the floor, or just a bad smell in the room.
Exactly. A bad smell is highly annoying, yes, but it's not terrifying. Shards of glass are dangerous to step on, but they signify that the thing is already broken and destroyed. The imagery you choose dictates the emotional response of the public. The author is giving the reader full permission to laugh at the monster in the dark.
So after all this analysis, we reach the end of the blog post, the outro of the source material. What is the final verdict of this whole exercise?
The conclusion the author draws is remarkably clear. Tyranny's brittleness is a fatal survival trap. If you remain a rigid glass giant, you will inevitably, eventually shatter.
It's not a matter of if it happens, but when it happens, like a chandelier in a sandstorm.
The choice presented to the regime is binary. Remain glass and die, or become gas and survive.
If you become gas like Jupiter, you can last 4.6 billion years.
And the ultimate takeaway line from the piece is, in the game of giants, glass breaks, but gas, well, gas just passes.
A final scatological joke to seal the deal on the whole metaphor.
It's fitting.
It leaves us with a lot to chew on. But here is a provocative closing thought for you, the listener, to take away from this. The source clearly mentions that switching to the gas model might actually save the regime from collapse. It might make it truly resilient against internal and external pressure.
Right. The satirical, inflatable Islamic Republic might actually be a viable survival strategy. It might weather the storm that the glass version couldn't.
So ask yourself this question as we wrap up. Is a highly resilient, flexible tyranny, the gas giant model, actually scarier than a brittle one that we know will eventually break?
That is the real lingering question here. Brittle tyranny is awful, but it breaks. It ends. The suffering has an expiration date. It's painful. It's a very messy transition, but it definitively ends. We see the shards on the ground, and we know it's over.
But a gas giant tyranny?
It absorbs the meteor. It incorporates the descent into its own storm. It spins and adapts for billions of years. It never actually breaks.
That is a genuinely terrifying thought. Maybe we should be rooting for the glass to stay glass, so it can just finally shatter and be done with.
It's a very dark paradox. We naturally want regimes to be less brutal, to be less rigid. But if they become less rigid and more adaptable, they might just stay in power forever.
Something to mull over for sure.
Yeah.
We will leave you with the sign-off from the source material itself. Stay punny side up.
And until next orbit.
Thanks for diving in with us today.
It was a blast.
Literally.
Literally.
See you next time.